Welcome to People Are the Point. I'm your host, Mark Concannon. Let's talk about the people. Hello, I'm Mark Concannon, your host for People Are the Point. Today, I have the pleasure of having Ted Whetstone join me with Breakthrough Think. He's a professional coach and consultant, combining strategic thinking, empathetic listening to transform client challenges into inspiring new frontiers. And he's also a global citizen who spent the last couple of decades in California. He has done everything from lead companies to consulting to now coaching and helping transform organizations. So please enjoy the show. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Where are you dialing in from today?
Santa Monica, California, about a block from the ocean. It's a nice day.
Nice. Actually, I know I lived in California for a long time, but I felt like I got to the beach maybe once a month. Do you actually go out and take advantage of it sometimes?
You know, you're right. I was just writing someone how ever since I saw Jaws, I won't put more than my ankle in the water.
Oh, no.
But really, everyone, California did a good sales job on, the whole California beach because the water's cold, quite frankly. No, but it's just gorgeous. In life, we often worry about the things that aren't going well, but I can always go out one block, look over the ocean and just be in awe. It's a beautiful sight. I'm fortunate.
That's amazing. How long have you been in California?
25 years.
Wow. And what brought you out there originally?
Oh boy, long story. I lived in Tokyo for 6 years, was running a company there, and lost most of this hair in the process. Decided to leave corporate and then ended up consulting and then coaching the corporate. But my brother was here, and you know what? After leaving Tokyo, like, where do you go next? I said, let me hang out for a little bit to see my next move. And it's hard to leave once you've been in LA. Weather, yeah. And just so much to offer.
I think for me, I moved to Seattle for a little while, and I love it up there because I enjoy changing weather. That's definitely with LA. You always have pretty much the same thing. So I think there's just personality differences. I like the change. A lot of people just like the sunshine. I got a little overburnt on the sun. I was ready for some clouds.
I'm with you too. Exactly. Like, we're not all in the sun anymore, but yes, you're right. The seasons here change by about 5-10 degrees. That's about it.
Yeah, that sounds right. Well, a couple of questions today I wanted to get into. First, let's talk a little bit about, can you share a story about someone in your personal and professional life had a lasting impact on your journey and how they shaped the way you approach your work and your relationships today?
Wow. Okay. Well, let's start with the heavy ones first.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. You never know when you're going to make an impact on someone. A story that comes to mind, high school, I grew up in Europe in Geneva, and I don't even remember why, how, when, but of course that was in 79, 1980 timeframe. And a gentleman neighbor said, "Hey, I want to take you downtown and teach you about this thing called Lotus 1-2-3. And as a high school kid, I thought, what the heck? And, that's the predecessor to Excel, of course. Well, then, head to college, and computers were barely something we knew. But my first job out of college, a sales director was having me do all these numbers for the territories, all by hand. And I thought, there's a better way to do this. And so I brought out Lotus 1-2-3 and created this whole spreadsheet thing. And not only were they blown away, but of course, that is one of my favorite tools to date. Excel is just my happy place, right? So you just never know when someone extends a hand and says, "Hey, there's a change happening. There's a tool that may help you in life." And I have to say that gesture, two things happened. One, a couple years ago, not even more than two, I reached out to him to say, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but you made this difference to me 40 years ago." And he was touched, because you never know the difference you make to people. And it's one of the things is to let people know they made a difference, because they're not necessarily doing it to get a pat on the back, but it's that, circle of life thing that really helps support it. He passed, not long after that. And his son just was so grateful that he had that feedback. So again, it's a simple idea, but I think for me, it has always been being there for other people to help them see things, know things that perhaps they didn't or didn't have access to. And it's part of the giving just for the sake of giving. But of course, it comes back tenfold when it does. So it's a good practice just to have all the time.
Well, that brings me back to you mentioned a minute ago, quick highlight of your career, like from leader into consulting and then into coaching. So right now, what's brought you back to that space where it's all about giving back?
Well, it's selfish, of course, because I think what we end up doing what we most need or want to do. I mean, if you're lucky. So sometimes you have to work for a corporate position, and you usually that gives you some satisfaction, but too often it forces you into a job or role that maybe you'd like to be doing other things. So having the gift and the luxury to start my own business, let me just be clear, and it's not easy, but you get to tune it to make it what you want. My consulting business was back out of my engineering training and everything else, very left brain approach to fixing organizational problems. Good at it, love it. But there was this thing missing, which was the people side. It was about process and procedures and everything I know you know in your business. And I thought, well, what about the people? And so I think it was more coming into me than anything else. And I didn't realize it, but I want to do problem solving with people because that's what I would want. I wish I had someone like me in my life when I was struggling as a young executive. And so now I want to help others do that, to get clear on who they are, where they want to be, where they want to go, and what they want to stand for, and then help. We just can't do these things alone. So to be there to help somebody else hear their own words and help steer them in directions that they hadn't realized they'd locked themselves out of. So it's an unfolding story that it's gone there now. Look, helping individuals, helping organizations is great. Next step, the world.
Right. That's good. Next question about how do your hobbies or passions outside of work contribute to your well-being and influence the way you lead or approach challenges? And now you're coaching, right? So how does what's outside of work change your work?
Okay, well, let's get into it. As a kid, I was fascinated with electricity, with magnets, with motors, and I wondered, like, how did the world work? So it's no surprise that I ended up studying physics at school and all that. But what I didn't realize was I wasn't a technologist. I wanted to understand, how things work. And, there was a silent thing. Okay, let's go be vulnerable. When I was a kid, I remember, oh boy, here we go. Do you remember this in the 70s, the theme from Mahogany? Do you know what you're hoping for? What is it you basically want? And, do you know? And I thought as a kid, my God, I don't know. And I'm supposed to. And I think that's the human search for knowledge, right? So we can finally know. And of course, there's no knowing. There's only knowing what you know, and then maybe knowing what you don't know, but there's the don't know what you don't know type realm. So the long story short is I've been interested in the mind and, humanity. I'm not the dumbest person in the world. I'm not the smartest, but I am blocked. And this is what I do for a living. And I see so many of us are blocked from ourselves, from each other. And we're all trying to get along, but we don't seem to be able to, right? So my feeling is it a lack of teachings in the world? And my thought is no. So then it's our inability to really hear them. And so I guess the long-winded, answer to your question is I became fascinated in the mind and like what gets in our way, how can we understand it individually, organizationally, and then again as a species. And so I've really been working on this thought platform. How can we learn to embrace, ambiguity and all that's going on in the world and, grow ourselves and everybody else in a sustainable way. And these are not paradoxes. You could have this or you could have that. We're smart enough. If we would just get out of our maybe ego-based perspective of things and really be able to conceive on a group-based perspective first and a personal perspective second, I think we have the capacity. It's either a muscle and or it's our language. So the long answer to your question is, and you would recognize this, as consultants, we get paid for our recommendations, what comes out of our mouth. As a coach, you get paid for your questions, right? And it's a different orientation that really isn't based in knowing. You're honestly needing to be open and create the space that someone can then step into areas they haven't really thought about. And I think the clarities that come from that end up becoming that knowing again. And when you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. Investing the time into slowing down and really figuring out what is it you want? What are your priorities? I know these are nice words, but they're usually just ideas. How do we get those fused into like the body so that those things happen? They're not just a good idea for someday, because last I checked, this is the only ride we get.
Well, it sounds a little bit like what you're saying is bringing your experience to the table, but being able to step away from your own ego and then help this individual in this way that is encouraging them to think it from the same perspective and apply your combined knowledge. And you said, ask the right questions to get to a new outcome.
You're exactly right. And just as we're doing here today, I don't think any of us can accomplish anything on our own. And we necessarily can't see what we can't see, but others can. And by engaging that, right, it is learned. So, and I love the way you said it. You are a partner with your client. You're not sitting across from each other here. I like to think that you're sitting next to each other, kind of looking forward at that picture that, you're co-creating. And in that way, you're a strategic partner trying to say, well, what does that look like? And what about this? And now you're on their team, we're not across the table from each other. And I think too many of us are across the table from each other. Let's figure out a picture that we're both trying to look into and help that person envision it. And then the strategies, tactics, all that to get there. Too many of us are out for ourselves, just trying to survive. And it's a pretty lonely existence, quite frankly, to be able to be there for others and vice versa. That's called being in community and being in support of each other.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, I thought interesting. Yeah, you mentioned that you wish in your early career, like when you were back in Japan running a company, that you had maybe had someone like you in your life at the time to coach and mentor. What would you have told yourself? Like, what would today Ted tell 30-year ago Ted as his coach? What would you say?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Let me think about that. It really was, well, I think for anyone at almost any age, quite frankly, but certainly younger people in their careers, we all have a sense of that imposter syndrome. And, it's usually, oh my God, how did I get in this position? I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Well, no one does. And it's not that they don't know what they're doing. It's that every instance, every circumstance necessarily hasn't been seen before in this unique manifestation. And so we're always dealing with new things. And so therefore we're out of our knowing realm. Of course, with age comes that know thyself. And I think what I would have told myself then, and not told, but probably asked, what do you think? And it's not what do you think you should think. It's like really listening to that. And again, here's a person who's a total left brainer or head type based person, learning this new language called the body and listening to intuition. And for a recovering logistician, a recovering rational, that was a new language. And so I think that that's what the younger me would have wanted to know about, was that there's a realm of self-knowing that doesn't have to come with time. It's always been there. But I have a metaphor that I like to use. I'll throw it out to you quickly, which is, why do the trees turn colors in the fall? Of course, it's fall. This is perfectly appropriate. And the answer is they don't. The metaphor I like is that chlorophyll is filling the leaves when the sun is shining, right? And the chlorophyll, the green, overwhelms the colors. But in the fall, as the temperatures cool, the chlorophyll drains, for lack of a better term, and those colors are revealed. The metaphor, of course, is that we're always chasing the green and often not being who we truly are. And if you just slow down and listen into what and who you are, and sometimes be guided through those conversations, that person's been there all the time. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to get that chlorophyll out. It doesn't have to be money. It's just whatever identity, ego, all those things we try to be to look right. Whereas you were always there, and it's a lot more calm place to come from knowing thyself than to trying to be something that you perceive other people want you to be, which is not the case. And I wish we'd all known that as a young person, it would have been a lot less stressful.
That's great, Ted. I never heard. I understood that science, but I like the metaphor. That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about in balancing a successful career and personal life? So as you look at the things that are inside of work and outside of work, although I'm sure with coaching it begins to blur more and more, but what practices or values have you found most essential for maintaining your connections, both at home and in the office?
Yeah, it really is. It really is an easy thing just to ask people. When you meet people in a networking situation, I never ask, well, I do ask, what do you do? But boy, I shoot myself if that comes out of my mouth. What I love to ask is, what's your creative pursuit? And they often, are stumped. But the next thing you know, they start talking, well, I like to do this and I enjoy that. And I'm kind of a big book fan. And you learn a lot more about people by asking who they are, not what they do. And so I think that's sort of, the part of the answer to your question. There's a bifurcation I think we're all experience. There's this outward personality that we project either intentionally or not. And then there's this inward self. And the idea that there's your personal self and your work self, boy, did I have those as separate identities for a long time. It's not only stressful, it's a shame, I guess, if you will, that we don't get the whole person. And so, yeah, I think we are getting to a time when people, thankfully, young people are like, wait a minute, this work-life balance.
It is a balance.
It is a balance, and it's an integration. I always say what you do anywhere is what you do everywhere. And so while I'm working with leaders on how they can be more effective, in their workspaces, those same rules apply back home. And too often you can look at, if they don't have a good home life, it's showing up in their work life and vice versa. So this idea of those realms being separate is a bit preposterous, obviously, seemingly on the surface. Who you are is who you are wherever you are. And the more you are who you are, obviously within limits, I like to dress up on Halloween. Maybe I won't do that every day at work. But the idea of self-expression and then showing it gives people permission to be themselves. And listen, I'm talking a big game, and I'm still at work at peeling off those layers of identity and look good and all those things. But I find what do they say? Marianne Shalou, they'll never remember what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel. It really is true. And how you make people feel is not from what the words, the smart things you said. It's really where you came from in saying those. And I think we all see right through it. We don't realize it. So I look, coaching is more that blending the heart, the mind, the soul, obviously the productive output. For me, it's really about becoming everything we can be. It's about living our best life, making our contribution, and experiencing joy out of it. It is tough when we are all just slammed. And so that's the biggest crime, is to not have a moment for a balanced lifestyle, but to be giving of yourself so much that there's nothing left. The story of the giving tree, where it just gave and gave and gave. And unfortunately that happens to a lot of us. And then we're just too exhausted to give of ourselves. And two people miss out on that. You, who get to express whatever is there, and then at least one other person, if not an awful lot of people, who are robbed of the opportunity to experience your gifts.
Absolutely. It leaves you not ready for the next opportunity when you've given too much to the ones before.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Agreed. Well, a little bit of it too speaks to, I've been hearing some insights on, hey, we look at business cases, right? We talk about, you're in your MBA and you're looking at business cases, and it's as if we're looking for a cookie cutter approach, when what got us here isn't what we need to do again, or we're right back here again. So that innovation and actual change is new. And new, I think, Ted, what you're touching on 100% is us being ourselves and taking our lessons, but then also applying them new to the next challenge. And also being prepared for that opportunity, not having burnt ourselves out. Yeah, I agree.
It's so true. I'm sure you see this with your clients. It's like, yes, what we knew yesterday, then we would have done these things the way we've done them. But, what's new today, what's coming, and therefore, let's that Carol Dweck fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. It's habitual to think, okay, we know how the world works, and let's go forward. And of course, the more you know you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you go into these problems, to your point, with a growth mindset and say, hey, we think we know these things, but what else don't we even know that could be, and what could those impacts be? More and more, that's the world we need to live into, because it's changing all the time. And so then we just need to be taking a very different mindset, a forward mindset, which is a creative stance, than a reverse mindset, which is more of a sort of the difference between a leader and a manager.
Yeah.
A manager does things right. A leader does the right things.
Yeah.
It's often planting the seeds that seem, why are we doing this now? And then, oh, that was prescient. That's what we all need to do, is be more leaders in our lives and less managers.
Yeah, agreed. Well, on the personal front, is there anything fun you did this summer that was like something rewarding for yourself, or getting away? Anything that was part of this year?
Wow. Okay. So two things. I went to high school in Switzerland, and that international high school celebrated its 100-year anniversary. So I wouldn't have gone back for a high school reunion, except that it was a global reunion, and now really was a chance to see all kinds of old friends, figuratively and literally. And that was just a trip, just to see, of course, people who haven't seen for 40 years and all their different incarnations. Two things interesting. One is there are some people that you couldn't wait to get back and see, and it wasn't necessarily what it used to be. And then there were those people who I didn't really know that, oh my God, it was like rediscovering them. And so who knows if I wasn't alert to it then, and or I had grown or they had grown, but people change, as we know. And it's easy to fire relationships, but it's so wonderful to realize the relationships you hadn't had, that there's so much more depth. So it was a big, lovely reconnection. And then the second journey I took this summer was 2.5 weeks in Alaska with two buddies. And look, I wouldn't do this if they weren't fans of being in the outdoors, but we're out there camping. We camped in freezing weather one night. We were out there in bear country in the middle of nowhere, came across a grizzly bear. I mean, all the classic stories. It was beautiful. It was fall with the transition of the colors. We saw Denali, which is often hard to see. It was at least 6 bucket lists, and just gratitude over the top to be able to do that. And then both physically and, taking time out of the business, but gratitude, boy, we hear that a lot. I wish I could be present to gratitude every moment of the day, because it takes us to step out of our daily stuff to realize this is, I'm going to sound corny, this is a gift, this thing called life. That's why they call it the present. I had to do that. But really, we're so busy either in the future or the past that it's the yoga of my life to just be in the moment. And that was one of those opportunities to do that. No devices, just be out in nature with close friends, and a gift.
Okay. Is there a grizzly story there, or is it just that you saw a bear and he walked away?
The story is grizzlies don't want anything to do with you if they can help it. It's when you catch them off guard or they've got their young that things can happen. It's probably not too different than people. Luckily, there were 3 of us. We looked more intimidating than it wanted. But yeah, look, for lifelong outdoorsmen, which my friends are, it's one of those, to come face to face with nature and to realize, I mean, of course, we know the awesome power of nature, but you really don't realize, how civilized we've become as a species. And how fundamentally, those bears don't want to be your buddy, but they also don't want to mess with you. So the idea of fearing them is probably the wrong language as much as respecting them. And they'll do the same if you do that. So.
I'm glad to hear that was a uneventful but rewarding experience. That's great. That's great. Well, Ted, is there anything else you want to share today before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you. I've known you now for well over a decade. And what I appreciate you even doing this program is that I know you're an incredibly smart person and leverage people to help your clients. That's spectacular. A lot of that always seems, I keep using the word left brain. That's not what I mean. It's functional, right? The customer's a problem. We solve problems. We give value, all that. And there's this other side of you that I've seen, which is that I'm going to say that you care. And it shows up as your commitment and just the kind of lifelong relationships you have. So I just want to acknowledge you, because it could be just about money. It could just be about business. It could be about checking a box, getting things done. it really feels like you're about, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'd love to hear your take on what it is you do, but I get that you are a person that is trying to grow the world, make it a better place, and truly help. What drives you, if I can ask you?
Sure, Ted. No, thank you, and I appreciate the compliments there. And absolutely, I'm glad it comes through. My goal is much like you said. This program, this podcast. I'm working on the book that reflects this conversation. It is about people for me, and I think it's a mutual commitment that each of us has to the other to make the effort to show up, be present, contribute, do the best that we can with the role we're challenged with, and be part of it, right? So I think that's really my goal here in the message is we all need to show up and be part of it and identify. I like what you said, Ted, today about knowing yourself, right? Know what it is that's a fit for you. And so if you're just chasing the money and you happen to be smart, there's all kinds of things you could do you might hate. But if you can figure out the one you enjoy and take that as the reward, money tends to follow anyway when you're good at the thing you're passionate about. So I think that's really what I enjoy about life. I've been fortunate enough, to your point, basically right into consulting day one out of college, and I found the right fit. So I've really loved helping clients solve problems. I love building the teams that are kind enough to take me on as a leader and allow me to help them with their careers. So it's been a really enjoyable ride so far, 30 years in, to your point about it's been a while. But yeah, I love what we're doing.
Yeah. What do you see possible with a world that can see people as what's important?
Well, I think, and this is a real challenge right now, I think we're at this pivot point in our culture with AI and the continued push. Capitalism obviously is very heavily towards money and only money. I think that what we have to do is help leaders see that, and many of them understand this, but that every decision isn't just the money I save today, right? It is also the money I'm going to have to spend tomorrow to make up for the decision I made today. And people are still the most adaptable, capable tool we have in our tool belt that can, to your point, show up as themselves, adapt to a new situation, be innovative. Computers are not innovative. They are tools, and they do the same thing over and over and over. It takes people to come up with new solutions and new ideas and new direction. So I think that's really what we can do, is find the right balance between efficiency and opportunity to make sure we're deploying people not as capital, but as powerful assets, both in our lives and in our work.
And I'll do a yes and to that, which is, people, what's the phrase? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That caring thing really is what matters. And then, it's what keeps people at companies is, I just did a facilitated leadership retreat, and look, they're having some issues internally, but the foundational pieces, they actually like each other and they actually all want to do well by the company. They just couldn't get on the same page. That is a foundational thing. I wouldn't even give it as a bipolar, that's the business side and the people side. It's almost like, no, the people is the foundation upon which everything must lie. Otherwise, it's a house of cards.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yep, absolutely, Ted. Well, thank you for the time today, and I appreciate all the kind words, and really look forward to us seeing what next year has to hold. And thank you for making us time today.
You too, my friend. Thanks for having me. Thanks for what you're doing.